Hello violinists, welcome to Prime Strings. I'm Henriette and this is lesson 52 in the violin class for beginners course. And after all the playing of pieces that we've done in recent lessons, we're going to get back into some technical stuff here. So today we're playing in the red book, exercise 74, and you can find that on page 33. Now, if you play from a green book, it is number 105 and you can find that on page 137. And this is about playing on the G string and D string and playing some double stops. Let me play that song for you first. I'm very aware that if you have a green book, that last note doesn't appear, but I think that doesn't really matter. We can just add it, or you can leave it out if you haven't got it in your book. Now, the nice thing about this piece is that you are going to play these really warm sounds. So let's just practice playing an open G string and an open D string, and you want to adjust your right elbow level so that you can precisely catch those two strings with your bow. So be careful that you have the right level right here. So you can look here on your violin whilst you wriggle your elbow to see if you have both strings there. So just the two open strings, here we go. And if you find yourself just playing the G string, it means that your elbow's gone a little bit too high, so drop your elbow down a little bit. And if you keep losing your G string, you might just raise your elbow level a little bit so you get a bit more G. And that's different for everyone. Whilst you do that, make sure that your right shoulder stays in its lowest position. Shall we just practice that again? Here we go. Two strings, G and D. Want to make sure today is that we're going to play our long bows straight. So you want to push your bow hand forwards until you play at the point of the bow and your arm is straight in front of you. So if you're ending up somewhere here, you can't really play double stops that way, you see, and that is because your hand has gone too far to your side. So straighten your bow arm forwards. So at the end of your bow stroke, you're here with your hand and not there. You see, that's the difference. Now, let's have a look at our music and let's go from the start. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it may be that it takes a couple of days for you to work out exactly the level of your strings, but I promise you after a little while, when you keep adjusting your elbow, you will manage to play the double stops. Now we're going to go one step further with the technique, and I'm going to have a look at bar 5, where you play the E, the first finger on the D string, and then the G string. And I want you to try that bar and leave the first finger on the D string while you play the open G string. So have a look here. I try not to lift my finger off the string while I play the open G string. I can play the G string with my first finger on D, you see. Shall we try that? Here we go. And again. Awesome, that's a really good technique to have. Let's do the same now with the second finger on the D string, and the second finger in this case is an F natural, so it comes right by the side of the first finger. Here we go, 2 on D. That's it, leave your second finger on D while you play the open G string. Super technique there. And you can see that 2 bars later in our piece where we slur the first finger to the third finger. You can only play that slurred, otherwise you would have played 2 Gs. Look, if I played separate bow, that would give me 2 separate Gs, you see. So if I want to hold a long G, a 4-count G, I'd call it a semi-breve or a whole note G, you call it whatever you like. I need to slur my 2 notes on the D string, and I'm leaving both fingers down on the D string when I do that. Let's practice that again, shall we? And this time when we play the next bar as well. Shall we practice these 2 bars one more time? And now, can we add one more new thing? When I'm playing from this first slurred bar into the second slurred bar, be careful that your bow doesn't jerk for the up bow here. I'll show you what I mean. We want to try and avoid this. I'm exaggerating, obviously, and I'm sure you don't do it as much as that. But let's see if we can get a really smooth bow change there. Here we go, and now if you find that tricky to achieve, take a look at your bow change right here. Gauge when your bow comes to the point. And as you play down bow, look at your point of your bow, because if you don't go quite as far to the point, your arm might think, oh, I've got to quickly go to the point, you see. And that's where you get the jerkiness in your bow. So shall we practice that one more time? Just these slurred bars. One more time, and now let's think about the tuning now, shall we? And I would like you to experiment. We're going to play the first finger on D together with the G string. And what we're going to try and do is push that finger up a little bit, then push that finger down a little bit so you play deliberately out of tune. And then we'll fine tune it. We're going to listen really, really hard today so that we find the precise spot where your E, first finger on D, sounds perfectly together with the open G string. So this is our chord. Now push your finger up a little bit so you deliberately make it out of tune. And now bring it back and bring it a little bit too far down. that this way you train your hearing so that you hear more precisely where that note is spot on in tune. And in everyday life, when you play the violin, you will constantly be listening out to where that center point is, where your finger is perfectly in tune. So we're finding that at the moment. Shall we practice that again? Now make it a bit too high. And now let's make it a little bit too low. Super good work. Now when you practice this a couple of days in a row, your hearing, you'll find, becomes more acute, and you can just tell, lower your finger a little bit or raise your finger a little bit. Shall we now practice the same thing with the second finger? So second finger in G. That's not nice. I'm bringing it back in tune. To make it too flat. And this one is much more difficult to hear because this is a dissonant. It's an F against a G, and that is more difficult to hear. But dissonance can actually also be out of tune, so we might practice it one more time, shall we? And now let's do the same thing with the third finger. Very unsettling, that, isn't it? But you hear that the octave is much easier to hear when you play a G string with the third finger on the D string, which is also called G. That is that octave, low G and high G together. That's much easier to hear, to get back in tune, than when you play the second finger and the G string. Now let's put the whole thing together and let's play from the beginning, making sure you leave your fingers on the D string as you've played them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lovely, lovely playing. Golly, you're getting really good at playing double stops. Thank you very much for joining me with this lesson. I look forward to seeing you again in lesson 53. Goodbye.